there's a documentary about Nazism and the parallels between Farage and the Führer are pretty stark, actually. You know, you watch it and you go, oh, yeah, it's terrifying, actually. And for somebody who, you know, it always starts with the queers, it always starts with us, and you look around and you go, what's been happening? Oh, that's been happening. And then all these other people who are minorities are, oh, now it's you're the trouble, and you're the trouble, and you're the trouble. And yeah, so have we had all the populism that we're going to have in this country? I don't think we have, not yet.
It's curious, isn't it? Because in 2019, I don't remember, this could be my ignorance, but I don't remember LGBT people being as much for football as they have been. Like, when I was just 5 years ago, there wasn't this debate about self-ID. There was that Channel 4 sting on Reform where they talked about the pride flag being that degenerate flag, which I found horrific and disgusting, but as I'm not a queer person.
Yeah.
What has that been like, that resurgence of that kind of language into, like, it's not, I wouldn't exactly say, well, excuse me, the trans stuff is absolutely mainstream, is mainstream is platformed. What has that been?
Yeah, I mean,
like?
It didn't used to be, like, you look at Kemi Badenoch's Twitter feed, and 2 years ago she's making very supportive noises. So you have to just look at where does this come from, and just over 6-7 years ago the evangelical church in America made it they said very explicitly, we want to separate the T from the LGBT community.
Jesus.
And then you look at where's the money coming from. A lot of it is coming from America. And then you look at the people in this country who are pushing that narrative, and you know, the witch woman might not say it explicitly, but what's her name? What's the pseudonym that she acts under?
As a verb, author's name.
Her author name.
Robert Galbraith.
Okay, and who was that Google search before it was her that came top? Robert Heath Galbraith, who was a conversion therapist for queer people. You've told us who you are. What's the high school where the kids get bullied? Stonewall.
Jesus.
Who's she set up a charity with? Baroness Nicholson. She's an anti-LGBT campaigner. She sent love to Miriam Cates, who has just been implicated in a conversion therapy scandal revolving around churches that she's been
a trustee of.
Thank you, a trustee. And you know, I'm searching for the words. I've had 2 drinks. Darling, she's a cheap date. You know, so these people have told us who they are.
Yep.
Listen to them. Listen.
Connor, Keir Starmer's kind of, I think, been.
I'm going to get sued now, aren't I? Tomorrow I'm going to be in court.
I think it'll be us.
I can't wait.
It'll be us, not you, Divina. But Connor, Keir Starmer's been, I think, playing to 2 audiences. He's been playing some quite dog whistly stuff with trans stuff, but he sent a letter to be published in Attitude magazine, that the publisher of Attitude said that he could not, in good faith, publish without some serious caveats. What have you made of the future Prime Minister, incoming Prime Minister's approach to queer people in this election?
I think it's a shame, because I think 6 months ago a lot of us had a lot of hope for what a Keir Starmer government could look like for LGBTQ plus people. I think now, especially in the last 7 days, the ear to the ground is kind of saying that people are now just looking for the lesser of 2 evils and not wanting to even vote for him. Most people that I know who are queer today all said they weren't voting for Keir Starmer, mainly because of his anti-trans stance that he's declared this week. I think the overall campaign, he's kind of seen to go on LGBT issues where the wind blows him, and that wind often takes him to the right, and it often takes him into territory that is really toxic for queer people, especially trans. Regarding the Attitude thing, I think that was yesterday, I thought that was a really good thing that Attitude did with that, and I thought it was really powerful.
I thought it was incredible.
It's very brave as well to basically take on the future Prime Minister that at that point we kind of knew was incoming. But I also think it's a testament to the fact that Keir Starmer maybe has read the room a little bit poorly fully on this and thinks that what he's done hasn't gone noticed by the LGBTQ plus community. I think they've heard what he said, and I think what Divina just said is very accurate also of Keir Starmer and the Labour Party at the moment, in that maybe they've shown us who they are on queer issues, and should we listen now?
And I think the message actually to our community is organise.
Yeah.
Get organised, because the people on the other side are being very organised, and they're being funded by people with very deep pockets. So in order for us not to have our rights rolled back, which is what we're talking about, 20 years we've had people have been using the facilities that align with their gender. There hasn't been a problem. There are 150 million people in the world doing exactly that. It's not a problem, living under self-ID. It hasn't been cataclysmic for people's societies. So I'm about evidence. Where's the evidence? Where's the data? What is it that I'm being shown by the data? If I was being shown by the data that actually, there is a very clear and specific issue with this demographic of people, I would be like, okay, how do we deal with that? But the reality is, 1% of rapists get prosecuted and only 2% get charged. Well, it's not trans people doing that, is it? They're 0.5% of the population. It's underfunding of the justice system, it's underfunding of the police system, and it's not taking those things seriously. This is a societal thing rather than, look over there, it's them. It's not them. It's not them. This is a much broader problem. And if you were serious about this issue, about violence against women and girls, which we absolutely should be, then you would be doing something about that rather than going, oh, look at these people who have no power and have no say in our society. We should blame them for all of this. It's so crazy.
It's well, I think kind of baffling as well is this pitch for an imaginary anti-trans vote when there was polling that said 2% of people said that the trans debate is a major issue for them in this election. It's like it's not you're appealing to newspaper columnists and who you're appealing to. I largely think you don't like if you talk to people up and down the country. Like what's in your mind? It's never. I'm concerned about someone being. I'm concerned.
Oh my God! Do you have a cock or a fanny? I don't know. Oh my God! I can't speak to you. I don't know how to deal with you right now. Can you just tell me? Because you have this haircut, so I just can't understand what's happening right now.
It's so.
What is going on? I don't know.
It's so jarring when you sit down for like a normally serious interview and like, can a woman have a penis?
What is a woman?
Yeah. And you're like, what?
That question.
Shut up.
I can't.
We have people choosing between whether they can eat or heat their homes, and we're talking about this. This is not a serious debate. This is not serious people. This is culture war nonsense that doesn't do anything to fix the systemic problem. Systemic problems in our society. What is really going on in the world? The world is on goddamn fire. Let's talk about that, because there won't be any toilets when the world's on fire, babe. It won't matter. There's no shelters that the Tories have underfunded and made sure that they've closed.
You would kill for a single-sex toilet, a unisex toilet.
I'd love a changing room, but right now I'm swimming.
I live in a tree now. I live in a tree. It's a unisex tree.
But can I also just say, on a side note to that, something that I've always found really frustrating as someone in the media is when you watch these journalists on, TV, radio stations, whatever, spending their time asking the leaders of our world, what is a woman? Can a woman have a penis? And they've got this, usually when you get offered time with these leading front benchers, you get 5 minutes. You often get 1 minute, one question. They have the luxury of asking questions that span 15 or so minutes. And they're spending time asking that instead of asking, how can we resolve the housing crisis? How can we make sure that people, talking about women and girls and violence, how can we make sure that they've got access to shelters? How can we make sure there's enough shelters? For example, that's just one example. How can we stop war in Europe? But no, let's ask, can a woman have a penis? Because that's what we're all worried about.
It's so jarring as well, because I actually kind of largely think Britain, even if I think Britain is quite it doesn't affect me. I literally don't care. Kind of.
Yeah,
place.
I think so.
I think like in all these in any town across the UK there will be an LGBTQ community of whatever size,
Totally.
and I think they'll probably largely be left to themselves. And I think most people think, and also, but somebody like even the most reformy person in the world, like your stereotypical reform voters are old, voted Brexit, whatever, they might have a gay grandson that they love.
They usually do.
Yeah,
to be quite honest.
But there's a very good chance. Like I think it's, and I'm concerned about the gains, or even just people like just children that use the football. They're just grim, just really grim. Like this is entirely anecdotal, but when I was in school, someone came out as trans, and the school handled it, I think, fairly well. I think it was the first time it ever happened at school, and not that big a deal was made. But I think now there'd be like, so parents who wouldn't have been outraged 10 years ago may have been radicalised in the past 5 years even, writing in, being like, asking these horrific personal questions.
I think it's fear-mongering is the word I'm thinking of, is because I think what we've seen is 10 years ago this was all happening. Trans people have been around since the dawn of time, gay people have been around since the dawn of time. That's proven, that's a fact. You know, trans people existing is a fact. But what's kind of being made to believe is that their identities are dangerous. That is not a fact, and there's no evidence of it, as Davina was saying. And I think with the school stuff, it's really interesting that we're seeing so much rhetoric around that, because it's making an issue out of something that's, as you said, not an issue.
Well, it was this, it was this story about the cats.
Oh
gosh,
one.
yeah, last year. This was last year.
Complete nonsense,
Yeah.
being shared by everybody, and then you find out where that comes from, and actually, it's a story that has been recycled since the 80s. In America, and it's because they have litter trays in their classrooms, so that if there's an active shooter situation and the kids need to piss themselves, they can do it in the tray.
Yeah, it's
like.
Do you know what though? On that,
I actually had this conversation with an older couple on a train. I'm sat on the table and they're having that conversation. Well. You've got kids pretending that they're cats now. Identifying as cats. I went, I'm really sorry. Hi, I'm your local rainbow
I'm
ranger.
your local drag queen.
Hi, it's me, Divina De Campo.
Local faggot. I'm also, having worked in education, I just need to point out this story is not true. And what happened was the story got shared and conflated, and then very quickly it disappeared. And it disappeared because, just like the quote that's on the strictest head teacher's wall from Churchill, that isn't from Churchill, it wasn't true.
Yeah.
The school were like, no, this isn't true, this has not happened, it's a load of bullshit. And that's what all of this is it's just these fabricated falsehoods and lies and fear-mongering, that it's that old adage about, a lie can travel around the world faster than the truth can get its pants on, isn't it?
We've seen...
Have I got us sued again?
I don't think so, I think it's fine.
I think that one was okay.
Unless, I don't know, maybe the cat thing's real. I don't know. It's not. Here tonight.
It's the litter tray. Yeah.
In prison.
What?
God.
You weren't here when
I'll have a nice time.
When the exit poll was conducted.
No.
How did it feel to see that tiny Conservative seat for you? What did you make of that? Was it cathartic, do you think?
Yeah, I'm pleased with that. I think there is also an element of be careful what you wish for, because the look of it is that Reform will get more seats than necessarily I would have expected.
Yeah, me too actually.
And I think that is an issue. And I think actually that creates a stronger argument against proportional representation than I would have hoped for. Yeah.
Gosh, I think can I push back on that actually?
Yeah.
So, I think people find first past the post an inherently dissatisfying system, and even ways that you try and make it more palatable by protesting, by voting Reform. There was a programme in South Devon where basically they arranged these primaries to choose a progressive candidate to rally around, and even speak to those people who are saying, well, I'm in this seat and they've said the Lib Dem candidate is the one to choose. I like the Green candidate, but I guess I'll vote Lib Dem. Like, it was that, they weren't enthusiastic. Versus, I think if you get people to be enthusiastic about voting, they might turn out in greater numbers for, so someone in, I actually wonder, I don't know what the right-wing version of this is actually, because Reform are the protest vote in this circumstance, I suppose. But I think if you get enough people, and also turnout was only 57%, which is tiny.
Is that all? I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
wow,
really, really
that's a lot less than I expected.
So if you get people more enthusiastic about voting and it becomes a more satisfying experience, if it doesn't become distorted, I think it will. If there's greater turnout and people aren't able to articulate themselves, not like I'm doing now, but at the ballot box, properly, people might get into the habit of voting more and find that more satisfying experience. That's what I'd come back to you on that to say. But I appreciate your concerns.
Reform genuinely terrifies me because of who they attract as their candidates. Why am I closing my arms? Who their candidates are, and the things that they say, and the things that they don't say, but they indicate. You know, it's all dog whistles. We know what I'm saying, rather than actually saying it explicitly. So yeah, I think maybe there is that element of.
Speaking of Reform, Ashfield is declaring. Sorry, is that Lee Anderson's 17,000, the only MP that Reform had? Oh my God, this is going to be. That's high, isn't it?
Well, that's a high number of votes already, 17,000.
17,000. Labour, 11,553. Conservatives, 3,000. That's Lee Anderson retaining his seat in Ashfield, isn't it?
That's crazy.
It's about to be confirmed. It is quite emotional.
Someone off screen saying they hate him.
Lee Anderson has retained his seat in Ashfield. That's a big thumb in the nose for the Conservatives. Labour 6,000 behind. Ashfield, I think it's at a local. Is that right? Oh, yeah. So if there's whoever the Independent is, if those people vote for the Labour Party, they'd be some Reform. That is interesting. So Reform have retained Ashfield. They've got their first elected MP.
I mean, I find it very difficult to, I'm who I am. I can't do anything about. I dress like this for my work, but if you see me walking down the street, I look like a fag, and there's nothing I can do about that. There's never been anything I can do about that. I just look the way that I do, and so it's very difficult for me to fathom voting for anybody that would vote against another minority in the way that, and create an environment which makes it difficult for minorities.
It's curious, isn't it? So my argument would usually be, you talked about people voting for Reform, and I would usually say you should have empathy for, not you specifically, one should have empathy for these people. The places where they live have been forgotten, left behind. It's been completely broken down. Absolutely. Totally. But I think it's quite easy for me to say as a cisgender straight white guy. I'm not the one.
Yeah, but where are you from?
Scotland, Glasgow. But I'm not in any way.
Scotland has been absolutely shafted by Westminster.
So, sorry, I know what you mean, though. I'm not persecuted. That's
You're
what
not feeling.
But I can understand why people vote the way that they do, because they feel like they've been forgotten. But right-wing politics has never offered the solution to society's problems. Because what is it that Reform want? They want to do trust on steroids. What happened there? They want to deregulate everything. And what does deregulation actually mean? It means no holiday, no maternity, no paternity, no workers' protections. You can get that's what deregulation actually means. So when they talk about we want to free up the market, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about we want to make it so that you can make more money. No, they want you to have less rights, and they want the people at the top to make more money. And that's the big problem in our society right now, is that the people at the top are extracting all of the money from those of us at the bottom. All you have to do is look at the energy companies and how much money they've made over the last couple of years, 10 times as much profit, while they're saying, well, our costs, the base cost of energy is so much more. Well, how can it be? And then you're making 10 times the profit. How can you as a supermarket say, oh, well, you know, we've had to put prices up because the cost for us is so much more, and then you're making £1 billion more profit than last year? That's a fucking lie.
Yeah, water companies as well. How are you getting the bonuses? Bonuses from the water companies.
You've lost money, you are in debt, and yet your CEO is making extra money on their bonus this year.
Conor, do you think what we're seeing with reform, we've kind of been talking about how fun it will be with the Portillo moments of the ministers being potentially losing their seats. Do you think, can we still have fun with that? Do you think that's still possible?
What, for like LGBT people to see the fun with ministers losing?
No, us in general, LGBT people.
I think there's definitely a lot of fun that can be seen in tonight. I think it's more also about the irony of certain people losing their seats. Because I think if we saw Kemi Badenoch unseated, that is a big message to the LGBT community that her dog whistling just hasn't worked and that they've had enough of it. And I think a lot of people don't think about the real world consequences that these tweets and these words have. You can, as an MP, log on to Twitter and tweet, we're going to stop children being taught about gender ideology. They don't realise that actually puts trans people in harm's way, because what that then does is makes parents at school think that the trans person that's maybe waiting to pick up their child has got this thing they're trying to push on them. So in terms of if we can see the fun in it, I think it's more about celebrating the karma of the situation. Is probably how I would describe it, because I think some of these people, I think it's what I said about Keir Starmer earlier, I think a lot of people forget that there are real world people seeing and noticing this behaviour, and I think queer people, they don't forget. I do. I think there's a lot of things that queer people don't have in common. I think one of the things we do is that burn us once, we'll remember it for the second time. But, you know, whether or not the rest of the population has that, I'm
curious,
sure.
which MPs, we talked about which MPs are dreadful in LGBT rights, which MPs are good in LGBT rights?
Gosh, let's start reading them off. Nadia Whittome, huge pioneer for queer rights. Alicia Kearns has pushed for a conversion therapy ban more than most of the Labour MPs have, dare we say it. Caroline Noakes, chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, same thing, been absolutely incredible, fought for an inclusive conversion therapy ban. Not me already starting to run out after 3. Dawn Butler's incredible. Emily Thornberry's been quite strong on it as well for the most part. She gave good answers to the trans questions. Doesn't mean she's a perfect MP, but yeah, as we were talking about earlier. Lloyd Russell Moyle is another one that we're sadly losing at this one, but that's a real shame and a real loss to the queer representation in Parliament. Luke Pollard's another really strong one, but the sad part is I think a lot of them don't always get listened to on queer issues. I think often it's also really hard to be heard in Parliament. I know that there's been MPs who have sat waiting for hours and hours to raise something about LGBT, and they get about 30 seconds to do it if they get it at all. But there are some really hardcore fighters.
It's easier to sell, you know, we were talking about this before we came on, it's easier to sell fear than it is to sell, actually, this is, you know, what's the stats, what's the data, what's the reality. It's much easier to sell, oh, danger, 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 rather than actually, this is the systemic problem, and in order for us to tackle this, it's not these people over here, it's all this other stuff around it that we actually have to fix. So, there's too much politicking rather than actually trying to fix shit.
There is, and I think on your question, Ed, about the good MPs, what I really hope that people take away is that not all MPs that are part of necessarily a bad part, that a party that they perceive as bad, are bad. I think every single party, maybe excluding probably Reform, let's be real, but if you look at the main parties, all of them have got incredible MPs within their ranks. All of them have also got terrible MPs. This is solely on queer issues, by the way. And I think it's important to separate that from party at times, where you can.
It's interesting that coalition, I think if you look at like the SNP in particular, you've got John Cherry, very quite firmly on the gender critical wing, shall we say, versus like marry black, and they sit in the same
Complete opposites.
Yeah,
Complete opposites.
But bound together by a desire for Scottish independence.
But the sad thing is, I think there's some people that would then look at that and say, well, Mary Black is an awful person because she's part of the SNP, and maybe they perceive the SNP as having that issue. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. I think from working in this job and getting to meet some of these people, like Nadia Whittam's the main one that comes to mind. Labour's been under a lot of heat this week, and rightly so. Does that mean she's a bad person and not on board with it? Absolutely not. I think she would fight harder than most of the MPs in that party for queer liberation, if you want to just umbrella term it with that. But it's a hard separation to make.
I'm curious, if we go back to that awful question about...
what is a woman?
What is a woman? What is a woman? No,
it's always what is a woman.
Genuinely, what is that? I'm actually trying to think, like, what... Obviously... What would you like them to say? I'm not trying to
like
catch
what's
you.
The correct answer?
No, I'm not in the correct answer. What would you be happy to hear? That's what I'm interested in.
I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, I think
it's not for me to talk about.
Yeah.
Are you a woman, or are you a man, or are you a non-binary person? I don't care.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't make any material difference to people's living conditions.
That's it. I think also it's
that's the fact,
Yeah.
and the fact is. You know, if you're a broadcast journalist and I'm an MP, the fact that you're asking me this tells me that you are not a serious person. It tells me that you are not interested in the problems in this country and you are trying to stoke culture wars. And actually, I shouldn't engage with you.
Yeah.
So would you like to ask me a question about something that actually will affect people's lives, or are you going to continue being a dickhead?
Can I add to that? Just to put this a bit more funny as well. I kind of wish they'd just say, that's so fucking weird that you just asked that.
Yeah.
To be quite honest.
Why are you so obsessed with people's genitals?
I just don't get it. I don't get it. When you're, a lot of the gay clubs, for example, almost all the toilets are unisex. And actually, a lot of the girls that I speak to there prefer it because they feel actually safer being around the gay men and stuff in the toilet than they do in the regular bars. And so this question just it's just a non-issue. It's what we've already said. It answers no problem that actually exists.
For the majority of people, it is a non-issue. There is a tiny minority of people who are very, very vocal and very aggressive and very, very angry that are very vocal about this and are very angry about it. But that's because they haven't got anything else going on in their life.
Well, what we also just said regarding how MPs can respond, I'd love them to ask, do you actually know any trans people?
Yeah, I think...
Actually, how about that? Do you actually have any close trans friends or family that have spoken to you about their real world issues and have shared what they might? Because maybe they might raise the concerns of, I have to wait 7 years to get the first appointment on gender health care. Yeah. Maybe then they'd start realising this is not the issue at hand. Just a thought.
And we've seen lots of there's been moments throughout the last few years where there has been one person and then suddenly there's been this huge shift and we're going, oh, everything's being rushed, everything's being this, it's too fast, it's this, it's that, because one person has had an issue. But if you look at, people who've had gender affirming surgery, more people regret having knee surgery than having gender affirming surgery. So we should actually stop giving people surgery on their knees or their hips or their spine by that logic, Yeah,
it's always the extremes. It's always the complete.
Yeah, because that's
cases that are used as evidence.
That's where all of those arguments always come from, isn't it? It's from the extremes of life, rather than
definitely.
What is the base of where most people are with everything?
Something we spoke about before we came on, which is, I think, relevant here. There's a reason these stories make the news. When someone says, oh, I regret this, it gets there because it's not happening often. What is the news? It's typically things that aren't happening in your day-to-day. If you live in a city where there's something that happens every single day, it's not on front page of the paper. But when you do have this one person who maybe comes forward and say, I have this regret, that's very valid. There are people that do, and I hope that they should be heard, and I don't think anyone's disputing that. But there's a reason that makes the front page, and it's A, because it stokes up all of what we're talking about, but B, because it's just not happening, and that's why it's news.
And actually, for the majority of those people, which is we're talking about, less than 2% of the people who have that surgery, and then a lot of those people then go back and transition because socially they haven't been supported. actually, if we just sorted out the problems that we've got in the NHS, having those support things in there, the cash report is flawed in a lot of ways because it ignores a lot of the evidence. However, it's saying, as we've had previously, reports saying the problem is that everything is so centralised. If you want to get in there, there isn't enough provision, and we need to decentralise that. And actually, the NHS doesn't have the services to provide to support young people in the way that they need anyway, in terms of their mental health and all these other factors. Well, if you sort that other stuff out, then actually maybe the system would work much better and be a much kinder place for people to engage with, where rather than having to wait 7 years before you get seen. I don't think that works very well.
Starmer picks up the phone tomorrow, appoints each of you to the House of Lords and invites you to be in his cabinet as Minister for LGBT rights. What's one thing you do tomorrow to improve the quality of LGBT people's lives?
God, I'd get rid of West Streeting.
Oh!
that would ruin one LGBT person's life.
Get rid of him. No.
Oh, gosh.
No, but yes.
You're messy, Davina.
I would, if you can fix the problems within the NHS, which means you have to invest in it properly, and then you have to also invest in social care properly, which in turn then saves us all money, then you can fix all of that stuff. But if you are inviting more private sector work into the NHS, that doesn't fix any of that stuff, because it is more expensive, it is less efficient, and it means that people don't get seen in the way that they need to be seen.
What about you, Conor?
I think just from a policy perspective, I'd love to see an action plan on tackling hate crime, to be honest. I think hate crime recently has reached, in the last few years, record high numbers, and especially on the trans community. And that's been attributed by the Home Office themselves to the media narratives that we've already discussed. So I think I'd love to see the next government, as they've been urged to do for years by most LGBT organisations, I would love to see a real world plan on how socially they can tackle that. And I don't think it's a really easy solvable thing overnight. I'm not pretending it is, but I do think we could have something in place that helps reduce the numbers.
Thank you so much for joining me on LGBT Corner, a regular segment on the PoliticsJOE podcast with its natural host.